Cuphead, a game known for being beautifully animated with a matching bombastic soundtrack and a massive development history that could fill a video of its own. In fact, I think a couple have. Cuphead took the world by storm, and obviously it was for a good reason. And it's not just known for its amazing quality, but it's notorious for being pretty hard. It's an amazing game, and one that I've always admired but never played, mostly because the difficulty turned me away. I don't handle or process anger and frustration very well, as it kind of just roundabouts its way into just being sadness. But I set out a goal that if we hit 200 subscribers, I would play Cuphead and its DLC and Hollow Knight, and not just play them to completion. I would do it all on a Fightstick. And what's a Fightstick, you may be asking? Well, it's essentially the equivalent of arcade controls. I personally have one because I prefer to play fighting games with it, but I discovered years ago that due to the PCB that I put in mine, basically the computer chip in this thing, it worked pretty much on every console, and any game that didn't use a second control stick for a camera. It wasn't until last year that I decided I wanted to do something with it, and set that goal, and well, we're well past 200 now, and this is long overdue. Due to this, I will say that I won't be doing the DLC, mostly because, again, this video took way too long to get ready, and I still have to play Hollow Knight. Again, I'm sorry about that. So without further ado, let's tackle Cuphead on a Fightstick.
Here's a real high-class bout. Now go!
Jumping into the game and knowing how to control a game with a Fightstick, I felt as though things would go quite smoothly. And for the earlier levels, this was the case. I grabbed 3 coins, bought the smoke bomb, and set out to the first run and gun level, Forest Follies, where after 1 death, we were able to finish our first level. Next was the Root Pack, and after 1 failed attempt at doing the secret boss,
we love you. Oh, we love the onion.
we finished this level with a perfect score before buying the roundabout shot and fighting the next boss, Ribby and Croaks. And this is when I discovered something about my control scheme, specifically that weapon swap was on the button furthest from my shooting button, meaning to swap I'd have to hit the button with my pinky, which was extremely uncomfortable. But I felt like I was swiftly getting a hold of the controls. Oh right, and the boss we beat on our first try without getting hit. 13 minutes in and we tackle the first mausoleum, finish the first mausoleum, and then fight Goopy LeGrand, who I easily sent straight to God. 16 minutes in and we've already completed a majority of Aisle 1. I felt like nothing could stop me. This was our first roadblock, Hilda Berg. Although I felt she wasn't too difficult, the splitting aerial projectiles of some of her transformations would make quick work of me if I wasn't careful. So after about 8 minutes and 4 deaths, I had beaten Hilda. It wasn't a massive roadblock, but it was a sign of what was to come. The next level we found ourselves in was Treetop Trouble, the second run and gun level, and it was at this point I started to grow tired of it. 8 minutes and 5 deaths later I had completed the level. Then came Cagney Carnation, and this was when another discovery was made about my control scheme. The joystick has a little bit of travel time before it fully registers a direction, meaning if I'm holding down and want to jump, but I press the jump button before my stick fully travels up or to a neutral position, I will fall through the platform. This makes sense, and it's just the controls working as intended. This could happen on a regular controller, but for some reason this was happening more to me on my stick. Luckily, I'm sure it won't affect anything in the future. No way, no how. It's such a small thing, and I'm sure that now that I've discovered this, I'll be able to work around it and not fall through platforms. Yeah. So, Cagney Carnation was another simple boss that I was able to clean up in about 3 minutes and 2 deaths, officially beating Aisle 1. Onwards to Aisle 2. After seeing Elder Kettle, we got hungry and decided to commit genocide in Candyland to a degree that would make Princess Bubblegum blush. Baroness Von Bonbon and her subject tried to put up a fight, but ultimately fell to me after about 3 minutes and only 1 death. Next was Jimmy the Great, who, unlike his fellow Isle Dweller, actually put up a fight, holding out for about 7 minutes and taking me out 5 different times. Then, there was the fucking clown. I hate this clown, and everything he stands for. Beppy's just a piece of shit. Based on how I'm talking about this fictional clown, you can assume this was the next roadblock, and Hilda was just a steep incline, but Beppy was a goddamn hike. From this donkey shooting horseshoes in ways I didn't expect, to dashing directly into either him or something else on screen, I had begun to feel a little angry. But after 15 minutes and 12 deaths, over double the amount of deaths I've had up to this point, I had slaughtered the clown and I had no remorse. Now that that's over, we can finally take things slow and play a... Oh, it wasn't that bad actually. I only died 2 times and the level only took 4 minutes to complete. Fantastic. Riding that high, I head off to fight Wally Warbles, who had us on the ropes, taking us down 5 times and almost taking us down for a 6th, but hey, they didn't give me my pilot license for nothing. Huh? I don't have authorization to be flying. I don't have a license? Jim, I'm the one with the bombs. And Wally Warbles fell, only taking us about 4 minutes to complete. Afterward, I went and quickly took care of the next mausoleum, and then set off once again. 2 levels only took us about 4 minutes to complete. I'm seeing a trend here. The next one must... Oh... This trippy ass level took me 20 minutes to complete, and I died only... about 16 times. This level had easily become the biggest roadblock I'd experienced up until this point. Hilda was a steep incline, Beppy was a hike, and this shit was a trek across the planet. At least it's over and we can move along. It can't get much worse. Okay, a few deaths, but we're not out just... I'll cry, I'll do it right now. Grim Matchstick, the bane of my existence and the great creature of my nightmares, had me lost for words. Not just because I struggled to the point of even buying and using the extra health charm, but because that little issue I was having before crept up on me. Remember how I pressed jump without fully going to neutral or up on my joystick would cause me to go through the platform? Cause I sure do. I sure do. This whole level was nothing but platforms, meaning the chance of this occurring was much higher than it was before. And it happened quite a few times, and a few times of those were run enders at that. I hated this level and was on the verge. The verge of what? I don't know, but I was reaching my limit. Thankfully, it only took 49 minutes? How many? 24 times! Man. After feeding Grim Matchstick, I had finally had enough and couldn't bring myself to play anymore. So, for my sanity, I said that I'd be up ripe and early tomorrow to continue Cuphead with a Fightstick and finally put an end to this challenge. So this challenge had a bigger effect on me than I thought it would. The thought of having to pick up my Fightstick again to play Cuphead was a little too much for me, and I honestly kind of avoided it as much as possible, as I did not want to go back to do this. But the show must go on. With my head held high and literally a week to decompress, I set off for Aisle 3, where we would take on Rumor Honeybottom, the next target on our hit list. Oh, and would you look at that? More platforms, my favorite! Thankfully, after upgrading my arsenal with the lobber and adjusting my strategy after a few failed attempts, I was able to easily defeat this boss and move along. I am lying to you, this boss almost broke me. I didn't find myself staring down a victory screen until about 35 minutes and 26 deaths. Although Grim Matchstick had taken longer, I had somehow been able to not only match, but surpass the total amount of deaths I had in a shorter amount of time. So I had at least something to be proud of, right? I then readjusted my arsenal, and after a brief moment of peace, I found myself heading forth to take on Captain Brinybeard, slugging away at this salty sea dog for what felt like an eternity, but only took me about 27 minutes with 19 deaths. It was a beating, but I've been through so much worse at this point. Now it's time to take on a... Oh god, please no! I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. Welcome to Hell in the Docks, my least favorite level out of the entire game. This level really got to me bad. So bad, in fact, that while playing, I simply paused and almost broke into tears. It had only been about 18 to 20 minutes, but I was at my limit. So, I stopped playing for the day. And the next day, I came back and I continued to play. Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to come back that next morning, but I came back nonetheless. The issue though is that after about 1 full hour of playtime and several levels later, I realized OBS was just not recording. So a total of 3 levels were just not recorded, meaning I don't have the death counts, but at least I know the time. I did wind up going back and beating these levels to at least show that I could do it, except the dogs, because there's no way in hell I'm replaying that level. I did try to go back and do it, but realizing that I, don't hate myself that bad, I didn't wind up finishing it a second time. But I promise you, the first time I had started the level, I had completed it. For the levels that I don't know their death count, I'll just add 10 deaths for Warner Woman and the medieval level, and 20 for the dogs, totaling to about 40 deaths across those stages, which honestly sounds about right. So, after beating the docks in hell, Warner Warman, and running the gauntlet against a massive Cyclops, I booked tickets to go see my favorite show in theaters, violence. Sally's stage play stood zero chance as I acted circles around her, having this stage total to be about 6 minutes with only 2 deaths on my record, which honestly gave me a great bit of morale when heading to the next hit on my list, the Cala Maria, who also didn't stand much of a chance, with her fight only taking about 3 minutes to complete with only 2 deaths. To say I was feeling good would be an understatement, as I felt as if the worst was finally behind us and I carried the confidence into the next fight against the Phantom Express. After struggling to understand the mechanics of the fight, switching up my arsenal, and crafting strategies to beat each phase of the fight, I found myself chugging across the finish line after about 12 minutes and 6 deaths. I was feeling good. Really good. And finally, it was time to... I forgot someone. Who did I... Oh no. Dr. Cal's Robot, a boss infamous for being the bane of almost every player's existence. But I would not be deterred by this. I went in with high hopes, and luckily I was on a Discord call with friends who honestly helped keep me sane through this fight. So, shout outs to you guys if you're watching this. From not understanding the mechanics, literally running into attacks, underestimating hitbox sizes, and even forming cheeky strategies, this boss pushed me to the edge of my limits, but was unsuccessful in breaking me as I stood strong. First, I focused on the 2 bottom elements with bombs at an angle that hit them both at the same time to remove unnecessary clutter from the screen so I could focus on the head laser afterwards. Then came blowing up the heart with more bombs, while maneuvering in such a pattern that I could blow up the electric bombs in one hit from my own bombs, then simply hitting the head with bombs as he swooped around. Lastly, the final phase, I prioritized living over damage, getting hits where I could, but focused more on piloting myself through the clusterfuck of his attacks until I was ecstatic that after about 43 minutes and 29 deaths, I had successfully beaten Dr. Cal's Robots and had beaten everyone in the Isles, meaning it was time to take on King Dice and then the devil himself. With my newfound confidence, I walked straight into... At this point, you should already know that I took a... Luckily, I wasn't gone that long, and felt up to challenge the last 2 bosses, and of course, up first, we started with the man himself, the right-hand man of the devil. Some may even call him a whiz on the poker table. I'd call him a king. King Dice, to be exact. This boss has the most unique fight of them all, having me parry a dice to move along a board to determine what occurs until I get to the end, where I actually fight King Dice himself. And how did it go? Not as bad as you may think. I had gone in with my lobber and boomerang combo that I've been using since Rumor Honey Bottom, as the lobber let me hit enemies from odd angles for big damage, and the boomerang let me focus on platforming and hitting enemies without having to face them. This proved to be somewhat effective against some of the mini-bosses, but I would still find myself unable to make it far into the table, having multiple deaths without even getting a chance to fight King Dice, and landing on start over 2 times during actually good runs was also kind of not helping. But that's besides the point. To beat this boss, I was going to need to not just develop strategies to beat King Dice, but how I planned on beating the mini-bosses I was inevitably going to end up fighting, since I struggled in rolling the numbers I actually wanted. But after multiple failed attempts, I had at this point seen every unique fight and had fought King Dice once. And not only did I feel like I had the download on the enemies, but I realized something. I was barely using the lobber, and the smoke grenade didn't feel one bit necessary and even a little bit of an inhibitor in fighting King Dice himself. So I adjusted accordingly, taking the roundabout to deal with the majority of the mini bosses, the supercharged attack super, and the chaser to deal with the domino fight in King Dice, and as my charm, I took extra health to help me withstand the gauntlet. With these new adjustments and several more failed attempts, I had officially taken the crown and defeated King Dice with a time of 44 minutes and 10 deaths. And after taking the crown, I was ready to take the throne, and nothing was going to stand in my way. With his lackey felled, it was time to fight the ringleader himself, the devil. I denied his offer of joining his team, as I knew the only way I'd be freed from my own hell would be to send him back to his. I swathed back to the lobber and the smoke bomb and prepped myself mentally, only to defeat him within 7 minutes and 3 deaths. Honestly, a pretty anticlimactic ending for what has been such a difficult challenge for me. And after everything, after about 211 deaths and about 7 hours, 1 minute and 13 seconds of game time, I had completed Cuphead on a Fightstick. It was a joyous occasion, but I'll be honest, I'm just glad this challenge is over, and despite literally being on the verge of tears many times, I genuinely enjoyed the game. Cuphead is amazing, and I'm very glad to have finally experienced it, and in due time, I'm sure I'll be back for the DLC. But right now, I have an even bigger challenge looming over me.